what happens when a player decides to return for a 23rd NBA season at 40 years old? You'd expect it to be a complete disaster, right? After all, most players are retired long before that age, and the few who aren't usually spend their final years coming off the bench or mentoring young players. But not LeBron James. Most people remember him for the championships, MVPs, and all the records. However, what everyone might forget is that one of the most unbelievable seasons of his entire career came at age 41, a season where he was still dropping 30-point games, recording triple-doubles, and somehow dominating players who grew up watching him. The craziest part about all this? Nobody thought it was possible. So, how was LeBron still able to humble the entire NBA at 41 years old? Well, to understand that, we first have to look at why he returned in the first place.
Shocking here, because coming into this series, people heavily favored had the Lakers. The Minnesota Timberwolves have beaten the Lakers 4-1.
LeBron James, after having his 22nd season in the NBA ended far earlier than most expected, began deep contemplation about his potential return for a record-setting 23rd year in the league as a 41-year-old.
I mean, I got a lot to think about myself, so I don't know what the roster will look like. I don't know what where I stand right now.
But NBA fans, after waiting for months and months, would finally get to hear James' decision for the 2025-2026 season on October 7th, when Bron put out a tweet announcing the decision too, which sent fans into deep speculation around whether this was regarding his retirement or if it was simply a joke.
What's your decision?
In this fall, man, this is tough. In this fall, I'm gonna be taking my talents to Hennessy VSOP.
However, despite this hilarious marketing idea, the four-time NBA champion would actually confirm to fans what they had been hoping for since that final buzzer rang out back in April, shortly after.
LeBron James is opting in to his nearly $53 million player option for the 2025-2026 season.
A decision that, despite the King retaining his crown of being the oldest player in the whole NBA, was ultimately an easy one to make for the Ohio native, because even being in his 40s, LeBron still retains something that he held since he first stepped foot onto an NBA court all the way back in 2003.
I have the passion and the admiration to host the Larry O'Brien Trophy up every single year, but I also have a realization of what particular team I have been a part of in that particular year.
So, the Lakers, with their core of LeBron James, Austin Reaves, and Luka Doncic being set, got to work at building an elite roster around their three-headed playmaking snake.
Free agent center DeAndre Ayton has reached agreement on a 2-year deal to sign with the Los Angeles Lakers. So Lakers have found their big man,
adding not only a true center in DeAndre Ayton, but also the former 2022 Defensive Player of the Year guard, Marcus Smart. However, despite these moves, analysts predicted Los Angeles would merely be a play-in team, a franchise that would likely get eliminated in just round 1 of the 2026 postseason.
My biggest concern with the Lakers is not in the regular season, it's in the postseason. Can they really lock down defensively and get key defensive stops? And LeBron James at his age is not the same defender that he once was in his career. Luka Doncic, there's no D in Doncic, just Doncic with O. It's just all about offense. So when I see this team, I see a lot of great regular season wins, but can you get key defensive stops over the course of a 7-game series against a high-profile team like Houston and OKC?
Combine this with the fact that LeBron, for the first time in his decades-long career, was set to miss training camp and the start of this fresh campaign.
Well, LeBron James will miss at least the next 3 to 4 weeks with sciatica, sidelining him for the start of the season.
Saw that doubt only continuing to rise. But despite all this negativity, LA, by the time their 2020 Finals MVP was cleared to compete in mid-November, held an impressive 10-4 record as James stepped foot onto the court for the first time this season against the Utah Jazz. Yet, would the arrival of a 40-year-old LeBron James actually help the Luka Doncic and Austin Reaves-led Lakers? Or would he only get in the way?
I'm a Swiss Army knife, so if that's spotting up, waiting for the, getting the ball from Luka or AR, if that's setting pick and rolls in transition, if that's slipping pick and rolls in transition, if that's, if we want to slow the game down in the half court, we want to get some post-up action and be able to create triggers, whatever the case may be.
Well, here we go. Welcome back. LeBron. This time, long lead by Doncic, trying to find LeBron. LeBron, here comes Reaves. Meaning, fourth quarter, 112-103. LeBron, boy, he
Yeah, I mean, listen, the mission has stayed the same no matter what my role has been throughout my career, and that's to go out there and try to dominate, try to make plays, try to, incite my teammates, make them feel, like we can, do the inevitable. So
LeBron James, incredibly, without a preseason or a training camp, came right in and contributed a crucial 11 points plus 12 assists, proving to all his doubters that he could in fact fit perfectly alongside Austin Reaves and Luka Doncic. But despite seemingly having perfect synergy with his youthful teammates, there were some teething issues throughout LeBron's initial 6 games back in the NBA.
I mean, off the off season when I was dealing with the sciatic and sciatic pain, whatever. So, missing training camp, missing preseason, missing the first 14 games of the regular season, was challenging for me. It was difficult for me. And it was also like, mentally, it kind of, got to me a little bit to even know or feel like I could get back to, my level of play, So, obviously when I got back, it took a little bit of time to kind of get that rhythm, to get that flow again after missing so much time. And but once I got going, it just felt good to be back out there with the group. Just being, having that growth mindset throughout my career to whatever position I would ever be able to be put in, to be dynamic. How can I always be a threat on the floor with or without the ball? And that's something I've kind of prided myself over.
A key mindset adaptation for his 23rd season that was on full display throughout their December 4th battle against the Toronto Raptors. Because as the clock approached triple zeros in Canada, LeBron James's insane 1,297 game-long streak of scoring at least 10 points was in jeopardy, as with the battle tied at 120 each, King James was presented with 2 choices: try to score and extend that streak, or kick it out to a potentially open teammate.
And how the streak ended on how I've always played the game. It's just, how can we win?
James in the corner for the win.
However, just 3 days after this incredible game-winning dime, everything took a dramatic turn for LeBron. Facing off against the Philadelphia 76ers, who were donning their throwback jerseys, LeBron seemingly wound the clock all the way back to when they were simply just the Sixers' normal jerseys. But it wasn't just in the first half in which James was showing that despite nearing his 41st birthday at the end of the month, he was still capable of putting his team on his back and carrying them to a victory.
LeBron again! He's back!
A shocking 29-point effort on 70% shooting while still pulling down 7 boards and throwing 6 assists, which had pushed LA yet again into the win column and their record to 17-6. An insane feat that the 4-time MVP simply continued throughout LA's following 3 battles.
How old is he, Ian?
I mean, they list 40.
Oh, LeBron James! A ferocious flush!
As they prepare to face crosstown rival, the LA Clippers, on December 20th and attempt to record their 20th W of this young season. Yet, even with King James going out and continuing to defy Father Time,
Lakers, 5 field goals made for LeBron, just 2 for everybody else. And who else but the King? Donovich right up in his jersey. LeBron trying to just aggressively get there, and he does. And 1.
By scoring an insane 36 points, his Lakers had unfortunately been pushed into the loss column by the Clippers. A sad fact that the historical franchise tragically continued on their superstar's 41st birthday in a battle against the Detroit Pistons.
We haven't had a full team all year. It's been a lot of, in and out. So that's very hard to, kind of get a rhythm, chemistry on the floor with guys that you're going to play with every night. Guys you're going to come in with subs and patterns and things like that. But it's still no excuse. We still got to go out and execute.
Another loss, which placed the Lakers' record heading into 2026 at 20-11. An unfortunate truth that LA would have to correct if they were to make a deep playoff run. But could they really earn a top 4 seed in the stacked Western Conference facing all these injury woes? Or would they succumb to those preseason predictions and simply just be a play-in team once again? January 2nd, 2026.
You should be up more than 5.
Well, LeBron hits a 3. Who goes around? Timeout, Memphis.
Fueled to push his franchise back to their winning ways, now as a 41-year-old, LeBron's 31-point, 9-rebound, and 6-assist night here had done just that. And guess what? The 4-time Finals MVP just kept dominating, dropping 26 points with 10 assists in their back-to-back battle against his favorite franchise, the Memphis Grizzlies, which the King followed up by doing some shocking things against the New Orleans Pelicans by adding in 30 points,
Stolen. Here goes LBJ.
grabbing 8 rebounds, and throwing 8 dimes. However, with LA suffering 3 straight losses shortly after this insane night, LeBron was desperate to return his squad back to the winning column here tonight against the Atlanta Hawks.
Oh, what a pass. What a pass. 4-13 Atlanta, 11-6 in the corner. And LeBron hits a big 3. Here comes LeBron.
Shockingly doing so by being just 1 rebound short of his first triple-double of this 2025-2026 season. 31 points, 10 assists, and 9 rebounds as his Lakers earned their 24th win. But over their next 10 battles, things started to go in the opposite direction.
You know, as at one point, obviously, we were kind of trying to figure out what we were as a team, you know, how we all could mesh together.
As with Bron's averages beginning to fall, putting in just 20.9 points plus 6 boards and 6 assists on average, LA had only managed to win 5. Yet, on the night that Los Angeles had recorded that 5th loss, their aging star had received some shocking news right before tip-off.
The childhood that comes out of me like, wow, like, bro, you're an all-star again. Like, you know, you remember those times where you were, like I said, I was watching it when I was a teenager or as a kid, and, you know, just seeing the greats and seeing the lights and wanting to be a part of that moment.
So, motivated from being named to his 22nd All-Star game, James was ready here tonight after their loss versus the Knicks to begin to turn things around and chase that number 1 or number 2 seed the Lakers so desperately needed to set themselves up for a deep playoff run.
There's James spinning, leaning, and hitting. Plus the foul away. Reaves looking for James. Off the foul to the ground. Percent from the floor. James the steal. James racing ahead.
An achievement that, once again, thanks to a massive 25-7 contribution from their 41-year-old superstar, which LeBron followed up with 17 points and 10 assists versus the 76ers, and then 20 points plus 10 dimes once again against the Golden State Warriors that had seen LA go on a mini 3-game winning streak to make things even better. Shortly before LeBron James's 20-10 night against San Francisco's NBA franchise, Los Angeles had made a massive move to bolster their roster.
All right, the Lakers, they made a move today. They acquired Luka from the Atlanta Hawks for Gabe Vincent and a 2032 second rounder. Kennard, he currently leads the NBA in 3-point field goal percentage. He averages almost 50%.
Only this trade didn't result in the positive changes general manager Rob Pelinka and his front office staff had hoped to see. Because over the Lakers' next 11 battles, that high seed James and his squad required for the easier first round matchups, which would hopefully allow them to go deep into the postseason, was slipping right through their fingertips. As even with Bron averaging 20.5 points on 50% shooting from the field and contributing 7.6 assists plus 5.5 rebounds, the Lakers had gone on a poor 5-6 run, with the only real positive occurring in their final night of this 11-game streak, in which the King had broken yet another NBA record.
Off the back end. James, turn around. He's got it. Most field goals in NBA history.
But despite now being the league leader for the most made field goals in NBA history. With his squad's record standing at 37 and 25, LeBron James knew just how important these final 20 games were going to be in increasing his chances of slipping that 5th ring on his hand and raising the Larry O'Brien trophy above his head one last time. March 12, 2026. After being forced to sit out of 3 games with an elbow injury sustained during his record-setting game against the Denver Nuggets, LeBron James returned tonight ready to add to his franchise's 3-game winning streak, which, after he poured in 18 points, 7 assists, and 7 rebounds, is exactly what Bron had done. However, things only got crazier because with the franchise's arrival into Texas to face off against a potential first-round rival, the Houston Rockets, LA had extended that winning streak to 6 and were looking to make it 7 in their 2nd game of their back-to-back matchup against the Kevin Durant-led Rockets.
Ball poked away by James, snapped on the other end and throws it down. Stay there. It's been a slow build. James! Oh, LeBron James! 41 years old, throwing it down. Picked up Laravia. Here comes James, runaway train! So aggressive, puts it up, shot is no good. James right there. He is turning back the clock here in the first half.
But it wasn't just the fact that somehow, some way, still playing at 40 plus years old, an age that only 36 other players in the history of the league had managed to reach, and a bracket of athletes that averaged just 6.6 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.4 assists, that LeBron was still dominant, that was the most shocking. No, that belonged to the fact that James seemingly hadn't lost a step from his 30s, because not only would the King help push his squad to their 7th win in a row,
throws it up, LeBron James!
But throughout their next battle against the Miami Heat,
Brown baseline driving, sets up Smart.
James, thanks to his 19-point, 15 rebound, and 10 assist performance in their 8th win in a row, had just become the oldest player in league history to record a triple-double. Yet things just got even more insane, as while the Eastern Conference's #1 seed had cut their victorious streak at 9, with various injuries on the Lakers roster, LeBron James' son, Bronny, received a larger role as the Lakers looked to round out their 2025-2026 regular season on a positive note.
To be able to, have Bronny in the locker room has definitely helped out a lot as well. Just, I have a job and a responsibility to show him what it means to be a professional, being in the locker room, being in film sessions, being on the plane, being, in everything that surrounds how to be a professional and, the results that come with it.
Where does playing alongside your son rank, especially considering everything that he's overcome?
#1, for sure. That's easy.
However, literally 2 weeks before the ball was set to be tipped for their round 1 playoff matchup, tragedy struck the Los Angeles Lakers.
Luka was playing at an MVP level. AR was playing at an all-star level, and we were just on fire. We were winning games. We were defending at a high level. We was one of the best offensive teams in the league, one of the top 10 defensive teams in the league. So, it was a great, up until that point was great. And then obviously like a week before the playoffs, everyone kind of know what happened.
Let's hope this is nothing. He looks like he's in a lot of pain now.
Facing off against who LA assumed would be their Western Conference Finals opponent, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Lakers would not only lose their playmaking superstar point guard, Luka Doncic, but also their rising all-star shooting guard, Austin Reaves.
We are heading into the playoffs with 2 of our biggest guns not playing, but it was definitely different because I figured I would go into the postseason as kind of like this Swiss Army knife role, but I was thrown back into that #1 option role,
resulting in many as the regular season seeding settled and the Lakers' first round matchup against the 5th seeded Kevin Durant-led Houston Rockets was set, believing that LA's postseason was going to be a very short one.
But let me be very, very clear, okay? Lakers going home very early, at the most 5, and I anticipate they might get swept.
I think a great player like LeBron can get you 1 game. I don't know if he can get you 4 at this stage at age 41 and the lack of playoff pieces that he has around him.
No, I agree with the both of them. I'm going with gentleman sweep. And listen, let me say this. The Lakers are dead bird tall grass. All right, this season is over. They're a first round exit. There's no way in hell you're going to ask a 41-year-old LeBron James to come in and lead in this tough Western Conference to try to lead this Laker team without Luka and Austin Reaves and win the series. Nah, it ain't happening.
Because while some players such as Michael Jordan, Vince Carter, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and John Stockton had contributed to their team's success in their 40s, no player above that age had ever carried a franchise on their back and been their true number one option in the postseason.
There's never been a 41-year-old who's been the best player in a playoff series.
However, despite all the noise, the four-time NBA champion remained confident heading into his 19th playoffs.
Listen, the postseason is about to be, as the young kids will say, lit.
Litty.
It's going to be litty. It's going to be crazy. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, my personal mindset is like, what y'all need? What y'all need tonight?
Yeah.
For me personally, my game 1 can be different from my game 2.
But even with their leader holding immense confidence, could the Los Angeles Lakers really get it done? Or would all these doubters be proved right? Game 1. Heading into this series, Lakers head coach JJ Redick outlined 2 vital points for his franchise's success.
We had 2 main keys. It was protect the ball and block out,
whilst also game planning for the massive Luka Doncic and Austin Reaves size holes in their roster.
Basically how our demographic of offensively how we're going to play had to completely change. So we spent a lot of time of this week, the week leading up to this game, honing in on what we need to do offensively, because it's just a different style of how we play now. We're missing so much.
Which allowed his squad to feel confident heading into a series that quite literally nobody assumed they could win.
If we could prepare ourselves, we could play well, we could compete at a high level, we could bring the physicality that Houston brought to the table, then we felt like we had a good chance of trying to, win each game, and that's all that mattered. It wasn't about the series. We was like, how can we win one game at a time?
So, as the ball was tipped for LeBron's 293rd playoff game, yes, that's literally 3.5 seasons of extra games played throughout his career, James was ready to show everyone how truly wrong they were.
James, long three-pointer, it's good! Backing in, double team. Left-handed, it's good! Down to 3. James falling away, puts it up, puts it in!
Yet, it wasn't the fact that James had just scored 19 points as a 41-year-old in the postseason that was impressive. No.
Inside to James, kicks it out, Hachimura, corner 3.
It was the fact that Bron had thrown 13 crucial assists, becoming the oldest player to ever record 10 or more dimes in a playoff game that had allowed his squad to steal a Game 1 victory. But even with the victory, one serious doubt remained, because Houston had played Game 1 without their superstar, and with Kevin Durant's return for Game 2, would those who predicted a gentleman's sweep be proved right?
Taken away by James with Durant on his hip. LeBron with the layup.
LeBron hellbent to earn his 5th Larry O'Brien trophy and match the man he had battled throughout his career. Kobe Bryant was unstoppable.
Right pass. Quick first step, reverse dunk. Through the legs a couple of times. To his left, strong, off the glass. Can't stop that. Lakers trying to close out game 2. James with the dunk.
Scoring 28 points, pulling down 8 rebounds, and throwing 7 assists, placing his franchise in territory he had never lost from in his 23-year-long career, up 2 games to 0.
First to 4 is never the first to 1, it's never the first to 2. And our whole mindset now is focused on game 3. We know we're going to a hostile environment. Guys tend to play better at home than they do on the road, so we have to be ready for that pack. We got to be ready for that intensity.
However, as the ball was tipped on Houston's home court for Game 3, the Rockets, having lost their superstar once again, likely for the remainder of this series, were desperately trying to claw their way back. Only LeBron James, alongside his own son, went out and did their best to ensure that they would be just one win away from the second round.
He was calling for it. I've seen his steps for so long. He was gathering, and I was like, just go get it. So he also made it 3 when they tried to disrespect him and go under on the pick and roll. He gave us a great minutes.
Which, thanks to Bronny achieving a shocking feat.
Bronny James had more points than the entire Rockets bench.
Plus his father's elite mindset.
I've learned, obviously, at my elder stage and being 41 years old to kind of like appreciate the small wins in the moment.
That saw LA within striking distance throughout this pivotal third battle. But with Rockets big man Alperen Şengün placing his franchise up 6 with just 40 seconds remaining, a Houston W seemed guaranteed. Yet Marcus Smart's incredible steal and clutch 3 made free throws in a row after being fouled had breathed life into his squad's third victory hopes.
They called timeout and we went in with a game plan to, not foul right away, try to make a play on the ball, see if we can create a turnover, extend the game a little bit, and I was able to get a back tap on Reaves.
Hachimura, he turns it over. Get it ahead for James. Slaps it over to Kennard. Lakers are down by 3 for the tie. It's good. LeBron James is money.
An insane 3, which not only brought James a total to 29 points to go along with his 13 rebounds that had pushed this game into overtime, a period in which their offseason acquisition rifled off 8 points by himself that saw LA placing themselves in a spot that literally no team had come back from in NBA history, up 3 games to 0. However, as LeBron James knows himself all too well, records like that are meant to be broken. So could the Houston Rockets become the first franchise to ever achieve this seemingly impossible feat? Game 4. After shockingly averaging 25.3 points, 9.7 rebounds, and 8.3 assists over his franchise's initial 3 first-round games, LeBron James began to struggle here tonight in their hopeful closeout game.
It started with me, obviously. My turnover was unacceptable, but
because due to their leaders' 8 turnovers and poor 2 of 9 shooting from the field, which resulted in a measly 10 points, it was ultimately the Rockets stealing a vital victory and placing themselves 1 game closer to NBA history, a feat that some analysts were starting to predict that they would actually achieve.
They are in trouble. As a matter of fact, the Rockets are going to win this series.
Ooh.
Everything right now, the Rockets,
Wow.
Yes.
History.
Yes, making history. And I'm sorry because Braun is going to be on the wrong side of it.
However, despite their Game 4 failure and the doubt that LeBron James could truly carry his franchise at 41 years old beginning to creep back in, LA would receive some incredible news before Game 5 arrived.
Rini, this just in, multiple sources are telling me right now that Austin Reaves and the Lakers are optimistic that he'll make his return to the lineup on Wednesday night in Game 5 against the Houston Rockets.
But once again, even with the return of their all-star scoring guard, things only continued to trend downhill for the Los Angeles Lakers.
We played well in the first quarter. We had a 10-point lead, gave up a 3-point play to end the quarter, and then they just started playing better and better as the quarters went on and was able to beat us.
As even with Bron returning to the form he had shown throughout their first 3 battles by adding in 25 points plus 7 assists, it was still the Houston Rockets securing victory, now just 2 games away from NBA history. A depressing reality that was starting to sink in for the Los Angeles Lakers.
None of us wanted to get back on the plane to go to Houston. We all wanted to close out at home and get some extra rest, especially my ass. I could use as many days as possible. It starts from the moment that we're all walking on the plane. It's our demeanor when we get on the plane. It's how we feel about the moment, and not shying away from it. And it goes down, like you said, to the film sessions, to whatever we're preparing for, all the way up until, the moment the ball tips.
Therefore, entering this battle on the Rockets' home court, LA had made some crucial changes to try and ensure that this would be the final game of this first round series.
Start to learn, the person that you're playing against, your opposition. Mm-hmm. You start to learn their tendencies. You start to see the flow of it. So, yeah, there are some minor adjustments. Sometimes there's a lineup change. Sometimes there's a shift in defensively or how you play offensively.
And LeBron James, after 4 championships, 10 NBA Finals appearances, and a 23-year-long career, continued to lead as he had always done.
And for me, as a leader of the team, I felt like, it was about, what team can kind of just hold their composure and stay even keel and understand the assignment. And that was kind of like my whole mindset going into game 6, like, breathing confidence into my guys, understanding like, listen, we're here for a reason, and we can close this thing out if we just limit our mistakes, both offensively and defensively.
So desperate to return once again to the second round, the King just continued to show how truly great he still was, despite being 41.
To James, bullet feed, Hachimura puts it down. Develop the way that they have. They're doing it right now without Doncic. LeBron James snaps in a 3. LeBron clears it. James, like a locomotive,
pouring in 18 points throughout the first half before continuing his insane play that shocked even his own teammates in the second.
I told him after the game, and I just went over to him and was like, you're insane. Like, it's the stuff that you're doing is not normal, like especially age, whatever. He's been in the league for 23 years. The way he demands a game, the way he can control a game, I don't think that you can say into words how special he was, not just tonight, but this series, this year.
However, their reward for defeating the Houston Rockets and advancing into the second round of the 2026 playoffs was none other than the defending NBA champion Oklahoma City Thunder, a task made even more difficult by the fact that LA, unless the series went all the way down to a deciding Game 7, was going to be missing Luka Doncic. But James had been proving everyone wrong all season long, so could he do it once more and dethrone OKC? Or without his superstar point guard, would this be the end of his epic 23rd season in the NBA? Facing off against the number 1 seeded Thunder, who were being led by the 2026 back-to-back MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, LA struggled to game plan for the insanely deep and well-rounded Thunder side.
I'm trying to figure out how can I nitpick OKC, but I can't. They defend. They make plays. Those guys. Yeah.
Because even with James averaging 23.3 points, 6 rebounds, and 5.8 assists, plus LeBron competing in his 300th playoff game during Game 2, it was tragically Oklahoma City who emerged victorious after just 4 games.
We fought and we played it to the maximum ability of our team. But ultimately, if we're being completely honest, we were out-talented. We were not outworked. We were not, they didn't out-physical us. They didn't outsmart us. I feel like we were just out-talented.
I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for me, obviously, as it stands right now tonight. I got a lot of time. I'll sit back, like I think I said it last year after we lost, I think, to Minnesota, there, go back and recalibrate with my family and talk with them and spend some time with them. And when the time comes, I'll obviously, you guys know.
Speaking of dominating the NBA as a 40-plus-year-old, did you know that Michael Jordan, despite retiring at 35 years old in 1998, actually returned in 2001 to play for the Washington Wizards for 2 seasons, in which he became the oldest player in league history to score 40 or more points? Well, to learn more about these often overlooked final seasons in Jordan's career, and to decide which of these 2 40-plus-year-olds performed better at the end of their careers, click the video on your screen right now.